Welcome to Radical Release, a healing series within There's No Way I Signed Up for This. This series was born in the in-between, the moments no one claps for, the silent breakdowns, the whispered prayers, the kind of healing that happens when no one's watching. This isn't about getting it all right. It's about learning to return to yourself with gentleness, with faith, and with enough grace to know that not having all the answers still means you're enough. Here, we talk about love after loss, peace after chaos, and how to hear God again, even when it's been quiet for a very long time. So take a breath. This is where we begin the radical release. Welcome back to Radical Release, a series of the podcast There's No Way I Signed Up for This. If this is your first time listening, I want you to know that this space is sacred. It's a space for the spiritually exhausted, the emotionally raw, and those who are doing the hard work of healing without all the answers yet. You are safe here. This episode is called Your Eyes Are Tired. What you're focusing on is draining you. And if your first reaction was to exhale just hearing that, then you're not alone. This episode was created because I realized something in my own healing journey. I wasn't always exhausted because I was working too much. I was exhausted because I was looking at and absorbing too much. Too many people's opinions, too many fake timelines, too much of everyone else's highlight reels while I was in the middle of my own healing season. And that kind of consumption will drain you. I want to start with giving us the foundation in Psalm 119:37 that says, "Turn my eyes away from worthless things. Preserve my life according to your word." What a prayer. This tells us that whatever we focus on is connected to how we live. Your life gets preserved, nourished, and aligned by what your eyes rest on. So if you're always staring at what hurts, or you're always focused on what happened to you, what failed you, who left, you begin to multiply that pain inwardly. We know this in the natural. If you stare at your screen too long, your vision gets blurry, your posture suffers, and your head starts to hurt. Well, in the same way, when you spiritually overconsume, your soul begins to ache. So let me ask you some questions. What have you been looking at? Are you focused more on your past than your future? Are you obsessing over someone else's journey and now doubting your own? Are you watching chaos online but ignoring the call within you to be still? A part of the radical release framework is the refocus. The first 6 episodes were about the forgiveness, and now we're walking into the next phase, refocusing. Refocus starts with your gaze, because what you look at is what you start to live from. Let's be honest, we're in a time where we could scroll more than we can see. And I'm just as guilty. On nights that I can't sleep, doom scrolling is what they call it. But yeah, I'll be next reel, next TikTok, next video, next YouTube short. It's that instant gratification. It's a digital numbing of a sort. And it starts to go from I can't sleep because of whatever reason to now I'm actively keeping myself awake because of the choice or method that I'm choosing to try to numb myself to sleep. If you've noticed that that's a part of your story, then we have some stuff to talk about. We weren't created to carry the emotional weight of thousands and thousands of stories a day. You were never meant to know minute by minute detail of every disaster, every injustice, or every celebrity's opinion. And the problem isn't that you care. The problem is that you're flooding your nervous system while trying to heal. Comparing your own healing journey with somebody else's story. Well, I should be further ahead. Or they went through something similar and look at what's going on with them. Or, yeah, it must be nice. You have all this money. Of course you can do all these things. Yeah. So we just add to all of that narrative that we have inside of us. And again, causing it to be a sort of a distraction away from our own healing story. God says in Proverbs 4:25, let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. And that's just not giving good advice. It's giving survival statements, requirements. You cannot heal while you're scrolling past everyone else's noise. You can't hear God while you're absorbing everyone else's suffering. Listening and comparing and empathizing and sympathizing, all at the stake of losing yourself. How many, okay, this is, you don't have to answer, but we are among friends. Have you had an issue, had a problem, and instead of dealing with it, you just picked up your phone and start scrolling? I don't want to deal with this right now. I'm just going to unplug. And that 20 minutes turns into 4 hours. You are literally losing time that you will not get back. So we have to understand that it's okay to disconnect. It's actually a survival aspect to disengage. So let's go a little bit further into that. When you're spiritually undernourished, the mind starts reaching for anything that feels stimulating. And we're in a culture now where everything is instant gratification, right? I click a button, this happens. But what did things look like before we had these little time machines in our hand? Because if you think about it, that's kind of what it is. You lose time. You picked up your phone at 1 o'clock. You put it down at 4 o'clock. You don't even know where those 3 hours went. But what was it like before we had all of those experiences, right? We had to sit with ourselves. Because when you start being overstimulated by everyone else's noise, you start to overthink. You start to obsess whatever everybody said. And now when you throw AI into this, right? The trackings of the algorithms, it knows what you're looking at. It knows what you're searching for. And for some of us, depending on what apps you have on your phone, it's listening. So it knows what to put on that time machine that you're holding. And now you're listening to stories that could be actually hurting you versus helping you, right? How many times, especially when you're looking at TikTok, you get these random tarot readers. He's coming back. He's thinking about you every day. And you're like, oh my gosh, what is this? It's because it knows what stories you're staying on longer. Because it knows what you're actively seeking out. And for some of us, it knows what you're saying. It knows what you're talking about. So it aligns to your narrative. It aligns to your story or whatever you feel your story is. Now, here's the key. Back to the foundation of this episode. What you focus on is what you're going to get. And I tell people this all the time. Whatever it is you think is true, you're absolutely right. Because that's what you are going to be looking for. So, if you're focused on pain, if you're focused on stress, if you're focused on consistent stories of people who are being treated or have been treated like you, guess what you're going to start seeing a lot of? Those elements to support your narrative. So to retrain that narrative, right? To retrain that algorithm, not just on your phone, but just in life, is changing your focus. Refocusing comes from what you feed your spirit first. Not what's in the group chat, not what's in the algorithm, not what's in your favorite YouTube rabbit hole. You begin your day with intentional stillness. Let's start there. How you start your day, that very first few moments of waking up, can align you and refocus you in a whole nother direction. You open your eyes and you say, God, what do you want me to see today? And let him recalibrate your vision. Remove the fog and help align you to what it is that you need in spirit. Because when you're surrounding yourself in the noise, it's usually the result of the spirit that's being silenced. You start to not be able to hear. And just let's sit here for a moment. How many of us have said, you just feel detached, disconnected, like I can't hear God's voice? When you get in those spaces, I want you to look around your environment. When you feel that God's voice is just not as loud as it used to be, or when you pray, it's just not connected as you used to be, or you start to forget to do it, right? You forget the prayers, you forget the meditation. Look what's going on in your environment, and not just your physical environment, your emotional environment, your psychological environment. Because fasting is not always what you're consuming in your body through your mouth. Fasting can also be what you're consuming through your eyes. So look at your environment. How often are you losing time to these applications, or to stories, or to the news, or to somebody else's issues, to where you are not focused on what you need to be focused on? I know on my phone, I have an Apple. It gives me a weekly readout of how many hours I've spent in certain applications. In some weeks, it's rather telling of what I'm going through in everyday life. So that's a challenge to you too, if you do have that capacity on your phones. And that's just the phones. Like we absorb stuff all over. If you're watching or streaming things on your television, when you go to work, who's bringing gossip to you, these are all spaces where you're consuming things that are changing your focus. But back to the challenge. Look how many hours a week you're spending on certain applications, and then start tracking that as it relates to what's going on in your life. And see if there's any correlation there, right? I was on TikTok for this many hours a week, and this was an exceptionally stressful week for me, right? Or I barely was on any of these applications this week, and I focused on my relationship with God, my healing journey. I got outside and touched the grass, and I liked it. And what does that look like? Take pictures of the grass, of the flowers. It's springtime, at least if you're on this side of the planet with me. It's gorgeous out here. And even in the storms, it's always beautiful afterwards. It's always some beautiful weather afterwards. So yeah, get outside, touch grass, but also just be aware of consuming things. It's not just what you consume through your mouth, like what food you're eating. It's also what you're consuming mentally, physically, spiritually. So let's go into some reflection here, because our key again is to refocus, right? We're in that phase. The framework is forgive, refocus, realign. So to realign ourselves where we need to be, we have to focus on the right things. So I want you to identify 3 things you looked at this week that left you drained instead of filled. And let's open that up. Not even what you've looked at this week, maybe even what you've heard Because some of us really aren't attached and addicted to our phones, but some of us are being drained through our interactions with people. So I want you to identify 3 things you looked at, or you heard, or people you interacted with this week that left you drained instead of feeling fulfilled. Then I want to ask you to ask yourself, what would it look like to guard my gates, to fast from visual and auditory clutter? What would that look like? In that time that you get back, what are you going to do with it? Like, think about it. Like the example I gave you. I picked up my phone. It was 1 o'clock. I put it down at 4 o'clock. What could I have done with that time that would have been much more productive in my healing journey than, I don't know, be nosy? I don't even remember what I was looking at. Think about that for a second. When you get stuck in these loops, or when someone's talking to you and you start to glaze over and you disassociate, like you don't even remember what's being said or what you looked at. What could you do with that time if it was returned to you? Even though it's not going to be. I hate to break it to you. We don't get that luxury, but we can make changes now with this refocusing. So what would it look like to guard your gates, to fast from that clutter? And then I want you to write a prayer that says, God, redirect my gaze. I want to see what you see, and I want to focus where you are and where you're guiding me. So all of these are going to be a part of in the description of the episode. And if you haven't, definitely check out the Graceful Reset section on the website. Again, I will link the website in the description here, Marie Asia, and go to the Graceful Reset. There's a lot of different resources, some from previous episodes, some mini journals, some trackers, things to kind of help you in your journey where you are. Again, using the time that we're going to get back doing this visual or clutter fasting. So our journal prompt as we end, again, God, turn my eyes away from what drains me. I want to see what gives life. Show me where my gaze has been out of alignment and bring it back to you. Remember, my focus is sacred. I release what drains me and I fix my eyes on what restores me. I give my gaze back to God. So again, ready to keep this going. Let's tap in. Let's hear where you're going to release that clutter. Where? And it can even be physical around your environment. Is there clutter that needs to be cleared out there? This is the season of spring cleaning. What areas have been keeping you stuck? And sometimes, it's not because we want to be stuck. Sometimes it's a process of refocusing. Sometimes it's a process of being honest and having that awareness that change needs to happen. So let's do that together. Again, thank you so much for being with me in this episode. Thank you so much for the feedback that we're beginning, because that lets me know that I'm being obedient, yes, but it's getting to the individuals who need to hear it. And we're doing this together. So as always, you all take care, stay safe, and I'll talk to you next episode.